it's Chimdi. I want to talk about self-sabotage. I want to talk about psyching yourself out because it's 2023 now, all right? We're in a whole new year. We have a whole new life ahead of us. We can do whatever we want. And I don't want, for myself, I don't want self-sabotage. I don't want psyching myself out to be the reason why I don't accomplish all of my hopes and dreams in the new year. This video was inspired by my recent binging of the Harry and Meghan documentary on Netflix. I don't know why I watched it, you know? And I think that's a big thing with healing is that you are driven by all of these unconscious fears. And so you find yourself doing things and engaging in behaviors and you're like, why did I do that? Why am I doing these things? And you don't know why. And it's like very confusing and disorienting because normally we think we're these rational creatures and we're like, I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So when we find ourselves in situations where we're like, how did I get here? It can be very freaky. And so as I marathoned all 6 episodes of this Harry and Meghan documentary until like 4 or 5 in the morning, after I just made a video where I talked about how I don't do that no more, I was like, what is going on? And then I followed that up by watching the Taylor Swift Miss Americana documentary. I made a whole separate video about how I love Taylor Swift now. Swiftie for life, etc. And it had very similar themes. And then I watched a Kelly Stamps video where she was talking about the reality of being an influencer and the stalking and the harassment and stuff. And I was like, that's when I started to be like, Chimdi, there's something going on here, all right? And this is what I realized. I know I have what it takes to be very successful on YouTube and in life. I think of myself in this moment as being very successful in YouTube and in life, but even more so, right? There's a part of me that's like, no, don't, stop, that is not safe. It's not safe to be successful. You will very literally be murdered. Also, apparently everything is existential. Whenever you have a fear, if you follow the fear all the way to the end, it always ends with, and then you'll die. And I'm like, but I don't want to die, I want to live. And so that's what I realized is like, first in watching Harry and Meghan, if you've seen the documentary, it literally starts with their like sweet little love story and they all loving each other. And then of course it goes public, they're dating. And then she faces this insane level of harassment, right? And I'm watching this and I'm just like, the part of me that's like, see, this is why you don't do it. See, look at how bad it was for her. See, she lost her family, she lost her friends. Do you see, all these people being mean to her? Do you see people threatening her baby? Do you see it? I'm just like, oh, I want to live, right? So I watched that. Then I watched Miss Americana. It has very similar themes where it's her being this incredibly talented artist, growing in success, and then people coming at her, like at her. And I'm just like, oh, and to me, I'm like, homegirl just wants to sing her little song. It's like, let her sing her little songs, y'all. People just coming at her. And then what I was doing as I was watching this content was ignoring the ending of both the Harry and Meghan and the Taylor Swift documentary, which is happy. Like both of those stories and very happily, Taylor Swift is literally the #1 artist on Spotify. Her most recent album just went like, it's breaking records left and right. I don't know all the records, but she's breaking them. Harry and Meghan got like they literally have 2 kids and 2 dogs living in a nice part of LA. Like their Netflix documentary is like the biggest documentary ever on Netflix. They're doing fine. Like they're doing actually really great. It made me realize that I was watching these things because I see the way I'm on the cusp. And it's interesting to see when we self-sabotage because I think often for me it comes right after a major breakthrough. This is something that actually came up with someone who was interested in coaching. I'm a creative coach, and if you aren't ready to coach, you can just DM me and we can do some DM coaching. And there was someone who was like that. She was like, oh, I'm not ready to like actually invest in myself in that way, but you know, and I was like, oh, like what challenge are you dealing with? And the challenge she was dealing with was that she would start doing something because she loved it. That led to this level of success, which then led to like all these new responsibilities and things. And then she started to hate it and then not really do it anymore and want to like move on from it. What I have found in my own life is that as I get this new level of success, for me it was going viral with the quitting my job video and then getting all of these new subscribers and then all of my videos like performing better than they've ever had before, and then that started to freak me out. So that was like sort of one of it. And then more recently it was, I got to do this commercial. I made a couple of videos about it. Got to do this commercial with 368 Studios for Cash App taxes. And that opportunity came truly like out of nowhere. It was so dope. It paid me a bunch of money and it was awesome. And at the same time I was like, oh shoot, like you were just minding your business and you got this opportunity. Imagine if you were actually like fully pouring into your creativity and like really showing up on YouTube the way you know you can, and like doing the actual work behind the scenes to like really show up, you would have even more opportunities and even more success and even more attention. Is that safe? And so what I was doing was watching a bunch of content to affirm for me that no, it wasn't, and that actually I'm right to stay small. And what I think is also really interesting is the way I say the word I, but like there's like true higher self me, and then there's like small self ego me who thinks I am my body and wants to just keep my body safe at all costs, right? So this small self version of me will even use my spirituality as an excuse. So it'll say, you shouldn't care about being successful on YouTube. You should only care about God. You know, you shouldn't be worried about uploading. You shouldn't be worried about this and that. Don't do any research. Don't do any editing. Just focus on the Lord, right? Isn't that your whole thing? Is that God provides? You can just vibe right and be successful. And it's very tempting because I know that if I create videos regularly, if I really show up in my full light, if I do the editing that I love to do anyway, growth is inevitable. Like that's just what's going to happen. But this part of me that thinks that's dangerous will use anything to keep me from doing those activities. And so it's been really interesting to talk to God and be like, oh wow, like how does it work for me to love and worship and be committed to like enlightenment and growth while also being in the marketplace, you know, in the world? And one thing I love about the Thomas Hubel, who I've not mentioned in what feels like such a long time, is he talks about how often as spiritual people, the goal is to like transcend and like get out of our bodies and go right to the spirit world and go like right to heaven and stuff. But that's not really the point. The point is to bring the light down, right? It's to bring God down into the world, into the earth, into our life, into the day-to-day, into the culture. Like it's to actually create a life infused with God's light, not to leave and get out of here, right? Like we wouldn't be incarnated on earth without a purpose, which I believe is to bring the light into the world, because that's the nature of life itself. This is getting real spiritual, as it would. But like the idea is not that God created the earth and then like was like, all right, deuces y'all, and is like now just watching. It's like the process of the earth being created is still happening. It's happening right now. Like this, me making this video, you watching this video, you being where you are, this is the process of the earth being created in real time. And so when I talk about spirituality, it's not about let me get out of here. It's about how do I do an even better job of bringing even more light into the world and shifting the actual world we live in to be more and more and more beautiful, right? Yeah, it's just been interesting thinking about the ways my ego, small self has been using spirituality and really whatever it can find to keep me from essentially being creative. And that's what I started to notice when I looked at where fear would come up and what it actually would do. And the whole sort of purpose of fear is to stop you from doing something. It's to stop you from expanding and from growth, because we want to stay the same because that feels safe to us. Even when it's something uncomfortable and bad, if it's familiar, there's something about like, well, at least I know what to expect. It's like staying in a relationship where you know the person isn't treating you right. It's like, yes, but I know it's very consistent how they're treating me badly, versus like taking a chance on yourself, going somewhere new, meeting someone new, or even like staying in a job. Like there's so many people who have left comments in my channel over these last couple of years where they're like, I really, really hate my job, but I'm really scared of going somewhere else. So the somewhere else could be infinitely better. And there are also so many comments from people who are like, I left my job and I got something even better, more pay, better coworkers, better work, more flexibility, all this kind of stuff, right? So some people have gotten to experience like, let me just take a leap, take a chance, try the unknown and get rewarded for it. But many others, they sort of keep themselves in that fear. And I'm a big believer in sort of honoring where we are in our process, so not trying to override it. And I think what I feel very grateful for is that I didn't even know, like I didn't have the awareness of understanding what I was doing. Like I was just doing it, right? I was just watching these things, consuming this content, and reinforcing this storyline that says to be a woman and to be successful and to be seen in that light is a dangerous thing, don't do it. And I was able to see for myself that of course that's tied to my own younger experience, but also we know in our culture and we know historically that people have been, really hurt as they've gotten bigger. So people do want a piece, there's stalking, there's all these things. Like bad things do happen to people, right? And so being born and breathing the air of that in the culture makes you think, okay, is it safe for me to really shine in my full brightness? And I feel like the answer is, of course, that you gotta shine. Like, you kind of have to. That's the whole point. And what I really appreciate about both those documentaries, even though those women do go through a lot, fundamentally, their purpose is tied to their process. So when I think about Meghan in that documentary, I still don't know her as a person, but when I think about her in that documentary, a big thing she's always cared about and advocated for is women's rights, women's, equality, women's empowerment. And so her literal life has been echoing that out, the process of standing up for herself, standing up to these big media organizations, being like, hurt because of it, but then rising out and overcoming it and showing everyone that it's possible. And the same thing for Taylor, like she was like, I am going to be this top artist. She worked and worked and worked, but she also had this thing around thinking that her approval and her love came from crowds, came from people outside of her. And so she went through this process where she had to learn the hard way, like, oh wait, people can be booing me, and that doesn't mean that I'm any less worthy of love and respect, and I'm any less talented as a singer and as a songwriter. And then she overcame that and is now doing even better than ever. Seeing these examples, at first they really were sort of, okay, this is why I really should, maybe I should focus on something else, get a new career. But seeing how it sort of played out made me realize, actually, no, they're doing really well. And I also mentioned Kelly Stamps in the beginning, and she just put out a video about being an influencer and some of the really trash parts about it, the stalking and all these different things. I just checked her channel. She's over 600,000 subscribers. And Taylor Swift is literally the #1 artist on Spotify. And Meghan Markle is the only Black person who's ever been royalty in England. That's not true. I don't know my history. So these people have huge accomplishments compared to where I am in my creative career. And what I was doing is I was comparing myself at around 17,000 subscribers to them at being incredibly further along in terms of the attention and the amount of eyes that's on them. So I think in that way, by putting my, step #1 at their step 500,000 or 40 million or whatever, that was me trying to say, since that's where you will end up, not even maybe, since there's an inevitability to you being that successful and being treated in that way, why even go down that path? When I think about my own personal experience as a creator, and it could just be because I haven't gotten to those numbers yet. When I think about my personal experience as a creator, I have been really blessed to not have a lot of nonsense and a lot of BS. And I think part of it is because of my own particular karmic package. I think each of us needs to deal with a particular set of stuff when we incarnate here on earth. And so I think certain things are not a part of my package and certain things are. So for instance, Kelly Stamps talked about how greed was one of the major things she had to deal with in her journey and being driven by wanting all this money. That isn't necessarily part of my karmic package because of my experiences so far. And I also think for a lot of these folks, it doesn't seem like healing trauma is a big deal. I don't hear them talk about it or mention it. It never came up in anyone's videos. It was how we have all this personal, ancestral, and collective trauma, and healing it is a really big deal. They don't seem to have that same kind of support system and autonomous people in their life, honestly, who can sort of help and support and guide them as they're going through all these things and really ground them in sort of the true fact that the point really is God. I think that's also, I always listen out for that. Whenever I watch media, is how often do people mention having a really rooted spiritual practice? Because I think that's really, really important, because otherwise you will just get lost in the world because it's all illusion. So you can't ever really ground yourself in things that are illusory, right? When I consider my own specific path, not only do I have my own stuff that I'm going to deal with, but I also am very blessed to have a community through this timeless wisdom training that I'm doing, which is a 2-year program on healing trauma, as well as a particular spiritual teacher who is embodying sort of the way I want to live my life. And I think those things are really supporting me in my process. And so that's what I'm basically saying, is that I'm hoping that all of these things are what's going to keep me from being murdered. So let's see. I shouldn't end with let's see, because that's what they're gonna put in the motherfucking, in the eulogy. That's what they're gonna put in the in the montage. It's as she said, let's see. But yeah, we're in a new year. We have hopes, we have dreams. And often we find that, we're like really excited about all the things we're gonna accomplish in the first month or two. And then by March, them New Year's resolutions start getting a little dusty. And I feel like understanding why these things that we want to do, why they don't end up coming into fruition, that is actually the key part to make it happen. Because otherwise we'll be distracted, we won't understand why things are happening in our life, and then we won't be able to actually do anything different because we don't have a real choice. So I really believe healing leads to a real choice. So essentially this is my commercial to say, if you haven't started healing some trauma, I highly recommend it. Thank you, Patreon people. I appreciate y'all. Let me know in the comments. Can you recognize the ways you have been self-sabotaging yourself? Are there times you found yourself doing things and you're just like, how did I get here? How did I get in this relationship? How did I get in this circumstance? How did I get in this environment? Let me know. And what are your resolutions for 2023? What are you gonna do this year? What are you gonna achieve? Where are you gonna be? All right, y'all.